Let's go with Gabriel in Michigan.
Hello,
Gabriel.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear
How are you?
We're doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Perfect. What can we help you with today?
Well, I wrote a syllogism that basically indicates or proves or whatever you want to say that God is imaginary. It only has 4 lines. I can give them to you.
Okay.
We
And,
probably need to hook you up with Richard.
Yeah, right? Let's
get the two of you connected.
or Rob. Just like let's
or Rob, hook you up with Rob, yeah.
Let's get you with Rob. All right, but let's hear it. What's your syllogism?
It's not a haiku, it's just a 4 line.
If it's a haiku
no
and a syllogism at the same time,
that would be
you
amazing.
win.
That would be pretty good. All right, let's give it a shot and see what you guys think. Premise 1, God is imaginary or non-imaginary. That's basically the law of non-contradiction. Agreed?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Premise 2, I have to give a definition, but I'll do it afterwards.
Okay.
Future predictive repeatability is the only reasonable method to distinguish the imaginary from the non-imaginary. And when I say future predictive repeatability, I mean testable. It's basically the scientific method. You make a prediction,
Right.
And then you get a result, an expected result. Okay?
All right. Let's see where this goes.
Premise 3, there is no future predictive repeatability for God.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm abbreviating that
Conclusion.
to FPR. Conclusion.
Yeah, well, just instead of future predictive repeatability, you can include in there the scientific method or empirical evidence if you prefer those terms.
Okay.
In conclusion, it is reasonable to believe God is imaginary.
That is one of the things that I often ask, especially when it comes to prayer. How can you be sure that your deity of choice answered your prayer? And obviously, the answer that they always come up with is, how else could it have been done? But let's we can talk about doing tests but it's always just like what you said. It's always unpredictable. The answers to these prayers, like you never know if it's going to happen, if it's not going to happen. You can ask for the same thing twice and get it one time and not the other. So
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really that's really the only access Christians or believers have to God is through the prayer. Is that?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But you'd have to have a repeatable test for that thing. We do that for everything else in our lives. Like, I'm sure you have a microphone in front of you. Do you?
Yes, we do.
Yes. No,
Okay.
I'm just
you see a microphone, and you have to decide whether that's imaginary or not imaginary. You make a prediction that if I put my hand on it, it'll push back. That's a future predictive thing. It's a test you can do, and that thing is real when you do it. But if suppose in a case where your hand passes through it, if it didn't make it didn't follow your prediction, and it could be a hallucination, it could be an illusion or something like that. So it could be in your brain, it could be part of your imagination. And we do that for pretty much everything in our lives except for God.
I'm curious because I feel like I would agree with this. I'm curious whether or not a Christian would. Because ideally the goal would be to get them to agree with all 3 premises and then nail them on the conclusion. But I'm curious how a Christian would interact with premises 2 and 3. Because I feel like there are definitely Christians who think they do have a way to prove that God is
They also
non-imaginary.
throw up the verse where you can't test God.
Right.
Oh yes, you can tell. Well, that's the thing is, if you can't do a test, it's reasonable to believe it's imaginary. You can't test for leprechauns. You can't test for unicorns. You can't test for an infinity number of imaginary things.
Right. So you could maybe say the imaginary things are unfalsifiable, and since God, and then you're basically saying since God is unfalsifiable, therefore God is imaginary. But
well, no, there's yeah. I mean, we can't. How should I put this? Until something has some empirical basis, some repeatable testability, it is reasonable to believe that they are imaginary.
I still think that they would.
I'm not saying there is no God. I'm saying until there is some repeatable test, that it is reasonable to believe that it is just in our imagination.
We are talking about reason, yes.
Yeah.
But that's not what believers always tend to work from. And when I do bring up, oftentimes when I'm discussing with believers, I do bring up talking about testing and show me your evidence and show me your proof. They always bring, I don't remember what that verse is. What is that verse where thou shalt not test God or...
Yeah, do not test the Lord thy God.
There, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know why I was blanking. So, but that always comes up as a scapegoat for getting out of showing evidence or testing God for me.
Something that might be interesting to do, because I like where you're going with this, I'm just concerned about its effectiveness when you're actually engaging with a theist. Something you might want to do is move from a syllogism to a plausible argument. So first, do this, have the same premise, same premises, same conclusion, but use something that isn't God. Use something that everybody can agree with and say, hey...
Russell's teapot?
Right. So Russell's teapot is either imaginary or non-imaginary. The way that we can predict if it's non-imaginary is by applying, X, Y, and Z. And then if we can't apply X, Y, and Z, therefore it is imaginary. Which again, I'm gonna have to do some more thinking on this. I'm not nearly as well versed in philosophy as some of my other host friends, but I think what you can do is get them to commit to those before you bring God into it, and then like that.
Yeah, it's not imaginary. It's right.
It's not imaginary. It's right there.
You could apply this to anything, really.
Right. So a good way to get them to agree to using it as a proof within the context of your argument would be to introduce it talking about something that isn't God, and then swap God in and say what's different about this syllogism now. And then whatever their answer is, then you can jump off and talk about that. I think that would probably be the best way to approach that.
That sounds very reasonable. Much better than what I was saying.
No, I think...
Yeah, I just wanted to put it in a form that, people can argue about it or not.
Right. No, and I think you've done that. I think that the forum, I'm going to have to, again, look at it again. And Matt's probably going to yell at me at some point, say it's wrong because of this and this. But for the purposes of this argument, it made a good conversation. And I think that's all that a good syllogism should do in theory. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're on the right track.
For sure. I'd finesse it a little bit, but for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys like it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for calling
Gabriel.
in. Have a good one.
You too. I'm going to get nailed on that later. Eric or Matt is just going to be like, you messed that up. You missed something. So probably going to issue a retraction next week. But for now,